Now, did you know that 81% of South African grade 4 pupils across all 11 official languages cannot read for meaning? I'll be joined by a panel of experts to discuss the main reasons behind this and possible solutions. But we begin with this story. The information regulator is conducting assessments on all political parties that are represented in Parliament. The regulator is evaluating if the parties are compliant with the Promotion of Access to Information Act and will also be doing on-site inspections at the offices of the various political parties. To discuss this further now, I'm joined by executive responsible for PAIA, that's Ntsumbedzeni Nemasisi. Good afternoon, welcome to today, Ntsumbedzeni. Firstly, you've started, I understand, on the 19th of May to carry out
yes.
your assessments. It's the 23rd, 4 days later. How is it going?
The assessment, good afternoon and good afternoon to the viewers. The assessment is going very well. We started with the ACDP, and yesterday I was in Cape Town. We were doing assessment for Al-Jama. On the 29th, we'll be doing DA and as well as the Good Party in Cape Town as well. We are finalizing the arrangement to do assessment for the ANC. So the assessment is going very well, and we're looking at those aspects that you have highlighted. For example, the biggest one in terms of assessment is the PAIA manual. And the second thing is it's whether they've got deputy information officer. But lastly is the one, Braden, is the one that relates to the political party funding. That's the one that we're looking at. Thank you.
Okay, so you want to see that they're complying with the Act and that they've put in place the structures and processes as political parties to comply?
Yes, what we're looking at in terms of manual is that every political party must have their PAIA manual available to assist those who want to access their information. But the most important one after the amendment is the political party funding. You remember there was a judgment by the court where they said the voters do have the rights to know who is funding the political parties. And the Political Funding Act was then passed. That legislation facilitates obviously the funding of the political party, but what the court says is that the PAIA must be amended to ensure that voters have got access to who is funding the political parties, how much are they being funded for, and that information, the regulator were checking if that information, the political parties are making that information available to the voters. As we're going to the election next year, our assessments to check whether when we go into the political party offices, do they have the records of those donations that they've received? Does the records include the names of the funders that they have? Because that's what the PAIA stipulate. We also check whether those records are available at their offices as well as at their website. Those are the biggest one that we check, but the other assessment that we look at as well is the issue of PAIA manual, whether they've got deputy information officers, and those are the aspects that we look at, but the biggest one is the political party funding records that we're looking at whether those records do exist to facilitate the voters who have to take a decision now, then as we're going to the national election, as to which political party should I choose?
Okay, so you are looking at their political party funding records, if they are well kept, well documented, and that if they are requested by any potential voter to really be available and they in transparent way that they can be seen. You are not, as PAIA, on behalf of PAIA, the Act, you are not looking into who has funded who. That's not your concern.
No. So in terms, IEC will look as to whether there's a proper disclosure in terms of legislation. For example, the Political Funding Act prescribes that where you receive a donation of over 100,000, you need to then disclose that to the IEC. So the IEC will then check whether there's a proper disclosure. But for us is that once there's a disclosure to the IEC, that information must be made available to the public. It must be available at the head office of the political party and not upon request. It must also be available on their website. So that's what we're looking at to say, are they compliant in terms of ensuring that there is a transparency in terms of the records that they've disclosed to the IEC? Are those records, can anyone be able to go to those political parties, check them, and be able to verify that indeed this person has received a donation of over 100,000 and this is the funder, and the records must be available at that office as well as in the website. So our assessment assessment is looking as to, once you decide you disclose to the IEC, we check whether those records are made available. That's where the information regulator comes in. As to whether there's a proper disclosure, that's the jurisdiction of the IEC.
Okay. I know you're just starting this. You just began it on the 19th. You've been to the ACDP, you've been to Al Jamaa. It might still be early, but just with these two parties you've mentioned, I know there's the bigger ones are still coming, the DA and the ANC and the EFF. Are you satisfied that they are doing all they can in complying with the PAIA?
And unfortunately, Braden, in terms of other aspects other than the donation, we have looked at whether their manual is available. We have found that the manual, one party, the manual was actually not even available. The other party, they've got a manual, but the manual was not in compliance with the Act. We've also found that there is no even delegation of deputy information officer, which means if you go now to that party and request access to information, chances that your request may not have been processed because there are no deputy information officer in one of the parties. So, but in terms of political funding donation records, in terms of the ACDP and Al Jamaa, our assessment has found that they did not receive any donation above the 100,000 threshold. So therefore, obviously they will not have those records because they can only disclose the records in which they receive a donation of over 100,000. I think the biggest one are those parties that have actually disclosed to the IEC. That's where we're going to check whether those records do indeed exist in their head office, as well as available to be made available to the public if the public come and want to access them, as well as at their website. They must be in their website. So those are one of the aspects that we'll look at. But for the two that we've conducted, they have actually disclosed to us that they never received any donation above 100,000, and we verified that with the IEC because we conducted IEC to give us all the records regarding the disclosure. So we did confirm that indeed they did not disclose anything to the IEC.
Okay, so nothing there, no political party donations have gone through to those two parties, ACDP and Al Jamaa. What's the penalty? Yes. Is there a penalty that the information regulator can impose on any political party for not complying with PAIA, both in terms of the manual and in terms of putting in place the delegated authority to a deputy information officer, and in terms of having proper record keeping and giving access to request to see who's funded them?
Indeed, if you remember previously, the Human Rights Commission was responsible for promotion of access to information, but they did not have the power there to enforce the compliance with the legislation. The information regulators got sufficient power. So after conducting this assessment, we're going to issue the report to these political parties, and we're going to inform them about our findings as well as the recommendations. If they do not comply with our recommendation, because in the recommendation we're going to indicate what is it that they should do to ensure compliance. If they do not comply, then what we do, we've got an enforcement committee. Those reports will then be referred to the enforcement committee, which will then make recommendation to the members, and we issue what we call an enforcement notice. Enforcement notice is like similar to a court order. If you don't comply with it, you are in contempt. We open the criminal case, and then you can be in prison for a period of 3 years. So it's important that whenever we issue the report, those report must be complied with, because we cannot be the information regulator that does not enforce. So we need to ensure that we enforce compliance with our findings as well as our recommendations. So the penalty obviously is that if you found guilty by the court of not complying with our enforcement notice, it will be 3 years imprisonment. And the obligation then in terms of the PAIA, it's on the leader of the political party. It is not any other person but the leader of the political party who's supposed to make sure that those information is available for ease of access of their records as the political parties.
Okay, so just to clarify that in this matter, in this current assessment you are doing of political parties, wherever you find that there's a gap in terms of PAIA, you will make a finding and you'll make a recommendation. And thereafter, you will monitor if that recommendation is being implemented. If not, you will then resort to legal means to enforce it. Oh, I hope he can come back. Ntsumbedzeni Nemasisi, there is an executive for PAIA. Just wanted to know exactly the process now of non-compliance. But there you have it. They've started the process on the 19th of this month. They're still going on. There's still bigger parties to come. The starting point was the ACDP, that's the African Christian Democratic Party, and Al Jamaa. Both parties have proven that they didn't receive any political party funding or donation beyond 100,000 as required by the new Political Party Funding Act and as confirmed by the IEC. But the job of PAIA is just to ensure there's compliance. They're going to carry on, and if they find that there's any non-compliance, he was saying, they will then make findings and recommendations which can be enforced. If you don't comply, you might face criminal charges, which might lead to a 3-year jail term. It's going to be very interesting to see what the other political parties are going to be found to be doing in terms of PAIA.